leery of the Shark Tank, who has, and we played the clips the other day twice, he said on Fox News to two different hosts, hey, I think we ought to look at merging America and Canada when it comes to our economy and our military. Now, wait a minute. That's the North American Union that we've been warning about since 2000, at least 2007, and we go back into the vault, warning about that with our friend Phyllis Schlafly. It really got kicked underway in 2005 with George W. Bush in Waco, Texas, right? And we played the clip many times, again this week, of Vicente Fox on Larry King, saying, Larry King says, are you talking about an Amero like the euro in Europe? Well, that's down the line. It'll start out as just a trading partner. That's how it'll start, he says. Well, that's how the common market pitched it in Europe before they ended up with the full-fledged European Union, right? It always starts like that. And now Donald Trump is talking like this. And many people like myself and Leo Holman and many others, Patrick Wood, are saying, wait a minute, this sounds like technocracy. They were calling for the idea of a North America Union, America, Canada, Mexico, all the way down to the Panama Canal and all the way up to Greenland. And we don't want to go that route. Now, let's see how much of this is just Donald Trump starting out at the negotiating point. Because Donald Trump, when he was running for president the first time, was very critical of the TTP, the the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He was very critical of that, in part because I think he had been briefed on it by U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, who was one of the people to come out with him at the beginning. And then Phyllis Schlafly was one of the, if not the first conservative, staunch conservative of the 70s to come out and endorse him. So he was actually President Trump talking as a candidate in 2016 against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which is really about really a North American Union. So I don't know who's talking in his ear now or if this is all just talking points. Now, before we get into this term that Steve Bannon is using and Charlie Kirk for, hey, this is Manifest Destiny 2.0. This is Manifest Destiny 2.0. What does that mean? Well, let's remember this. Jean Monnet, this is in my book, The Coming Religious Reich, that I wrote in 2016, and it's available as an ebook for free if you're a member of our vault at worldviewtube.com/vault. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to buy my documentaries. You don't need to buy my books. You don't need to buy anything other than if you get a membership to the vault, it's all in there for you under library and pick ebooks, and it's there. And one of the things I talk about on page 78 is the father of the European Union, Jean Monnet, the father of the European Union. He laid out what are 5 goals, 5 steps for bringing about such unions. Number 1, economic free trade partnerships. And that's what Vicente Fox was telling Larry King. Well, this will start out just as a free trade agreement. Yeah, that's how it starts. Step 1. Then 2, open borders and a shared citizenship and monetary system. Open borders. Do we have that? Did President Biden put out his executive order the North American Directorate? Yeah. He put that out as executive order. I've showed that to you guys many times on television as well. It was an executive order, Declaration of North America, and this was probably January 10th, 2023. January 10th, 2023. So he's been pushing on this. Do we have open borders? We sure do. Now, what's Kevin O'Leary calling for? Shared a monetary system. Now, again, what we got to make sure is we're praying for Mr. Trump, praying for President Trump, making sure he's got good counsel, and not buying into this because otherwise we're down the road here. But it is all prophetic. 10 horns or 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, who for 1 hour will give their authority and power to the beast. John the Revelator is writing and saying, there are 10 kings, 10 unions, if you will, who've not yet received a kingdom at the time John was writing on the island of Patmos as a political prisoner for preaching the gospel. They haven't received a kingdom at the time I'm writing this, but they will. These 10 world leaders will receive a kingdom. We would call them 10 unions, 10 federations maybe, as the Club of Rome, United Nations, and European Commission has laid out already. But they'll receive it, and then when they have it, they'll eventually give their power and authority to the beast. Now, Daniel 7 tells us that the Antichrist, as I've told you many times, is going to have to go to war to bring about the new world order. He is going to have to rip, so you're going to have these 10 regions or unions, and then 3 of them aren't going to go along with what the Antichrist wants, and Daniel 7 says he rips them out by the root. So we're going that direction. I just don't want to see President Trump do anything to be a part of this, because it's not what he really is for, so we've been told by his own words, right? But economic free trade partnership. Economic free trade partnership is step 1 of the John Monnet 5-step process. Remember, he's the father of the European Union. Step 2, again, open borders, shared citizenship, and a monetary system. Now, again, as they collapse the dollar, they're going to be looking to try to figure out how are we going to back the U.S. dollar. Maybe if we go into a partnership economically with Canada, as I've been telling you and talking about since 2010, if you go back into the vault, they'll back it with land and minerals. 3, external security partnership through solidarity in foreign policy. External security partnership. Look for terrorist attacks, particularly in Canada and America, and coming over the border in Mexico, to drive the 3 nations together. Remember in my documentary Siege, I played a clip that came out in, I think, December 2019. I play a clip from a man who said that Canada will become like an aircraft carrier from which Islamists will launch terrorist attacks. Canada will become like an aircraft carrier from which Islamists launch terrorist attacks. Not just coming over the border from Mexico, terrorist, but the northern border. So something is going to push the 2 nations together economically. Something is going to push the 2 nations together for external security through solidarity and foreign policy. 4, internal security, common rule of law enforcement. Internal security, common rule of law and enforcement. What could that be? The European Union, the European courts. Well, we'll have a North American Union pop more than likely with North American courts and common law for security. Dealing with what? Terrorists. At some point, I would not be shocked again that you will see laws in Canada, Mexico, America, that deal with their internal security problem of what they would call fundamentalists. We're going to deal with the fundamentalist Jew, the fundamentalist Christian, the fundamentalist Islamist. And they've already painted us, Christians, conservatives, and many Jews as the problem, have they not? They're the problem. But there might be other things that go on that are laws that they're going to want to deal with internally, from environmental laws, CBDC, biometric tracking, because then you can just flow back and forth between the 3 countries' borders. So you have to have laws that deal with that. Common rule of law and enforcement, particularly related to your open borders. 4. That was 4. 5, total control by supra-government of human rights and social progress. Total control by supra-government. So that's like a North American parliament, if you will. Now, we showed on television this week, talked about it on radio, the chart laid out by the Technocracy Incorporated, that group of guys from the 1930s that included Elon Musk's grandfather. And they were laying out their chart. And when we looked at the chart, we talked about the chart here on radio and television, it sounded just like that, a European parliament, or what would be a North American parliament. Now, these are our concerns. So, when you have talk show hosts and conservatives and America First proponents getting all excited on social media as they are, saying America is so back, and excited about this idea, wait a minute, MAGA people. When did MAGA people get excited about globalism? Well, here's the problem. We have too many MAGA people that are an inch deep and a mile wide. They don't know anything. They know a few things. We don't want open borders. We want our own culture, our own traditions, our own history. We don't want Marxism. We don't want socialism. We want free speech, freedom of religion. And of course, I agree with all of that. But sadly, many of the MAGA people are not students. Many of them, by the way, are brand new. They just came into the issue of politics and paying attention either under Donald Trump's first launch for president in 2016, or they've awakened during the 4 years of the Biden regime. So you have a lot to, being a little defensive of them. I would say I understand for a lot of you, you're brand new at this. So I'm not being critical. We all have to learn at some point in some place. But a lot of MAGA people, they're not very scholarly because for many of them, this is a new thing. They've never really been all that involved. The sad thing is, internet, podcasts have allowed some of those ignorant people, unschooled people, to get a following. And you have ignorance educating ignorance. Many of your podcasters today, where are their books? Where are their 15, 16, 20 books? Where are their 30, 35 years of articles and speeches and radio shows and TV shows and documentaries? Oh, wait a minute, they don't have any. There's nothing wrong with starting out. I had to start out at some point, but I knew because of the guys that mentored me, if you want to be taken seriously, you got to be a student and a scholar, and means you need to write books and you need to show a track record of your work. And these podcasters, they don't have that. Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview. We have a lot of folks in the podcast world that have no books, no documentaries, no history, no backing, no foundation. All they're good at is a rip and read. And that's not what we need. People that just rip something off of you say rip and read because you'd rip it off a teletype years ago and read it. We don't need people to just rip stuff off the internet and start talking. We need people that are students, that are readers. How many of your famous podcasters today, and that's one thing you can say about people like Steve Bannon. That guy's a reader, okay? Steve Bannon's a reader. Steve Bannon is one of the guys that reads and reads and reads. And there are a few others out there that are real readers. And of course, Steve Bannon has a long history of doing public policy and things. So I'm not referring to him. But some of these newbies that have shown up on the scene, they have no history. They have no history of being students who study. Most of them wouldn't even know the classics, like Frederick Bastiat's The Law. Have they read The Law by Frederick Bastiat? Small little book that shows you the purpose of the law and how the law is perverted for the purpose of plunder. How many of them have read books like Francis Schaeffer and many others I could name, right? They don't. And so the MAGA world, sadly, is filled with a lot of people that don't know. Now, I'm not being critical because, again, everybody has to learn at some point, right? All of us do. All of us did, and all of us still are learning. But the problem with the MAGA movement, by and large, I believe, is there is a lack of worldview foundation. Do they understand the 6 dominant worldviews that rule the world? No, they don't even know what the 6 dominant worldviews are. They couldn't list them. And if you ask them about, well, tell me about cosmic humanism, most of them would have no idea what you're talking about. Yet cosmic humanism is one of the most dominant worldviews in the world today, along, of course, with postmodernism. So the problem is we have a lot of work to be done. It's one thing to get elected, one thing to have your people win. It's another thing to then govern and to actually implement a worldview, ideas. from a constitutional republic framework. And we have many people today who have no such worldview, training, or foundation, and they're not students by choice. So when they say things like, well, we need to have a manifest destiny 2.0, what does that mean? Because a lot of people out there don't know what that means. Now, I think the people using it know what it means. But does the average American or MAGA person know what manifest destiny 2.0 is? And why do I believe manifest destiny is not the correct worldview or idea? Let me explain it. As I said, it came about in 1845 by a John O'Sullivan. He wrote about it. And I've got a couple articles here. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything the columnist is saying, okay? Doesn't mean that. But I do believe that some of these columnists, regardless of where they're coming from, have done some study and kind of get an understanding of what manifest destiny is and how it has been shaped into the political landscape of conservatives, of people that are part of the religious right, of people that are Reformed, of people that are Calvinist, of people that are not Calvinist, people that are dispensationalist, people that are not dispensationalist. There are many faces, many faces. In fact, that's one of the article titles. The many faces of Christian nationalism is one of the articles I bring to the desk today. And that's right, there are many faces. When you say Christian nationalism, what do you mean by that? It needs to be defined. One man's nationalism is another man's socialism. One man's nationalism is another man's patriotism. What do you mean by that? Isn't that one of the great questions we should always ask? Well, what do you mean by that? Do you ask that question often when someone says something? Well, what do you mean by that? How would you define that? Because you see, it's important to know what are the meanings of the words that people use. Because not everybody, when they say, well, I'm a Christian nationalist. Well, what does that mean to you? You could have 10 people in the room and ask them to write down a definition of their own personal belief system of Christian nationalism, and you're going to end up with very different answers. So there are many faces to this. And not everybody agrees theologically. Not everybody agrees when it comes to eschatology, end-time beliefs. There are various groups. And many within the MAGA world have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't even know what the word eschatology means. End-time beliefs, they don't know that. And therefore, many people are going to be led astray and buying into things because there's someone they like on many good issues. They're right on many good issues, and they begin to push something, and they're going to jump on the bandwagon and say, okay. It's important to be committed to principles, not personalities. Be committed to principles, not personalities. Sadly, most people in the MAGA movement are committed to their favorite America First politician at the local, state, or federal level, whoever that might be. And they really just follow the personality. They don't think for themselves. They just follow the lead of their favorite personality. Or they do that in the social media realm. They don't think for themselves. They just parrot what they hear their favorite podcaster say or their favorite person tweet on X. They don't really have their own worldview, their own ideas and beliefs. They're not students. They're followers. They're not leaders. And this is how you end up having a whole movement divided and spoiled, which the globalist would love to see the MAGA movement divided and spoiled. The other thing that many people in the MAGA movement who are not an inch deep and a mile wide, they are an inch deep and a mile wide at best, is they don't seem to understand that you can disagree with people on policy and still agree with them on many important issues. Like Ronald Reagan said, a great line in the Reagan movie. Someone that disagrees with, how do you say it? Someone that agrees with us 80%, someone that agrees with us 80% is not a 20% enemy. Okay? Someone that agrees with us 80% of the time, or we agree with them 20% of the time. We all agree. 80% of the time we agree. 80% of the time we agree. That doesn't mean that we're 20% enemies. So the MAGA world They need to mature a little bit. They need to grow up a little bit and realize you can disagree with certain MAGA people and personalities, and that's okay. Don't be so childish. We get emails, we get feedback, and the guys in the control room read it. And they tell me about it. And you know what a lot of them say? These people are stupid. I'm sorry, I'm being blunt. And the reason the guys in the control room said that these people are stupid is because they know that they're not thinking with reason and logic and context. They're having an emotional reaction because they're more committed to personalities and celebrities than they are to principles. And you're going to start seeing a lot of immaturity among the MAGA crowd because they don't think for themselves. And they cannot handle when you disagree with one of their favorite personalities or people or celebrities or social media stars. So let's lay down the rules. We can disagree with people on policy and still agree with 80% of what they're doing. Okay? People can have the freedom of conviction, the freedom of conscience. So let's go to one of the first articles. Manifest Destiny. The Many Faces of Christian Nationalism. It came out, this article, by John Wisely, Wilsey. And again, it's not an endorsement of everything he wrote in the article or everything he's ever written, but he does make some good points. It came out in the fall of 2022. And he's right, the many faces of Christian nationalism has many faces. Let me read a little bit. Samuel Danforth, he lived from 1626 to 1674. Now, this would have been obviously before John O'Sullivan kind of coined the phrase manifest destiny in 1845. But in the time of the colonies, Samuel Danforth was the pastor of the First Church in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And he preached a sermon on Matthew chapter 11, verses 7 through 9, in which he saw Massachusetts as fulfilling, by the way, interesting, it was the Massachusetts Bay Colony that outlawed the Jesuits. Did you know that? But they saw Massachusetts as fulfilling the biblical type of Israel going into the wilderness to hold a feast to the Lord after escaping Pharaoh's wrath. So they saw Massachusetts as a biblical type of Israel. Now, wait a minute. Why would anyone see America or Christianity as Israel? Because they're really into what's called replacement theology. Replacement theology. The Israel, the Jews, have been replaced by the Christians. Now, this, of course, not all your Presbyterians, but many of your Presbyterians, many of your Reformed people buy into this. This is why you have the massive anti-Semitism of John Calvin, Augustine, or Augustine, depending on how you say it, Martin Luther. Wait a minute now. You mean their eschatology, their end-time beliefs, and their theology are tied together? Yeah. You mean their theology and their eschatology helps to drive their public policy? Yeah. You want to know where someone's coming from? Find out their theology and eschatology. Now, what's very interesting is very quickly you're going to see how is it that people like the New Age Mormon Glenn Beck can find common ground with the Reconstructionist, the Dominionist. You know how? And they did, starting what, in 2010 when I was on the air criticizing Glenn Beck's, rally on the Mall in Washington, D.C. Glenn Beck's a Mormon, a New Age Mormon. Where do the Mormons think that the New Jerusalem is going to be, folks? Where? Anyone answer? Class? Independence, Missouri. You can go to Independence, Missouri right now, and you can see the cornerstones have already been laid. Joseph Smith picked Independence, Missouri to be the New Jerusalem where this temple will be built. And the Mormon Jesus is going to rule and reign from Independence, Missouri, the New Jerusalem. Huh. So the Mormons, if they follow that strain of Mormonism, they're various strains, but if they follow the teachings of Joseph Smith, Israel is really not so much the DNA of the Jews in Israel, but tied into Mormonism. Now, you see how the Mormons could then lock arms with the Reconstructionist, the Dominionist, who buy into replacement theology that say the real Israel today is who? The modern church. John Piper teaches this. Many of the Reformed people believe that. Not all. There are some dispensationalists that are Reformed. But traditionally, many of your Reformed and Presbyterian types and others would say that the Christian, the church, the modern church is the new Israel. Now you can see where some of this eschatology can bleed with each other, and all of a sudden you see the Reconstructionist and the Dominionist and the New Apostolic Reformation locking arms as they did in 2010 with New Age Mormon Glenn Beck. Huh. Now, some of these folks coming out of the colonies, being Reformed, believed that Massachusetts was fulfilling a new type of Israel. Now, come back, we'll pick it up because help us understand where this is really all going with the idea of a manifest destiny 2.0. Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com. All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com, worldviewradio.com. Stay tuned for Crosstalk coming up at the top of the hour. Jim Schneider on over 100 stations nationwide, vcy.org, vcy.org. So I'm talking about this idea of manifest destiny, which is being promoted by many conservatives and MAGA people now, that, hey, this whole idea of the expansionism of America, flowing out of its borders and into all of North America and maybe beyond. Where does it come from? There's a phrase, manifest destiny, formed by John O'Sullivan in 1845. But the idea was really already there, if you will, even in the colonies. As we said, many of the colonies in Massachusetts saw what they were doing as really a type of new Israel. In this article from 2022, The Many Faces of Christian Nationalism, the writer says, historian Ernest Lee Tuvison argued that the Puritans replaced the traditional amillennialism of medieval Europe with a progressive post-millennialism. In other words, instead of the idea, which I believe is a dispensationalist, that we don't build the kingdom of God here on earth, all right? Daniel 2 makes it clear, God's kingdom will come, it will crush Satan's kingdom, and of God's kingdom there'll be no end. That's why we pray what is called the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom, what? Be built by us? Help us, give us the power to build your kingdom on earth so you may come. Is that what the Lord's Prayer is? Is that how the Lord taught his disciples to pray? No. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom what? Not be built by us on earth, but thy kingdom come. How's that going to happen? Daniel 2. God's kingdom will come. It will crush Satan's kingdom at the end of the 7-year tribulation. There will be the rolling into the millennial kingdom with the Jews that have been sealed and preserved physically, spiritually. God will fulfill his covenant promises of Genesis 15 to Abraham, well beyond the land boundaries they're in now. But let's not confuse the church, ecclesia, called out ones, believers who have placed their faith and trust in Christ. Don't confuse that with Israel. Israel is a specific group of people and a nation of people. And there is the real Israel, and then there are even the fake Israel, meaning there are the real Jews who will come to Yeshua, our Messiah. That doesn't mean they're not real Jews in their DNA, but doesn't Paul speak of this? They're real in their faith of Christ, and they will be a part of that real Israel, the real Israel that will be established in the millennial kingdom and the ruling and reigning of Christ in the millennial reign, 1,000-year millennial reign here on earth. And the boundaries of Israel will be given to the Jews as promised in Abraham, but to Abraham in Genesis 15. Don't confuse the land barriers that Moses took his people to, and he had to stay on the outside, but don't confuse that with what's been promised to Abraham. That's going to happen. Israel is distinct. It'll be during the millennial kingdom. This will be fulfilled after the 7-year tribulation. Now, that's as opposed to the post-millennialism that really says we've got to fulfill this promise by us building the kingdom of God on earth, by moralizing, Christianizing nations. Do we believe that we want to see people become Christians? Yeah. Would we love to see Christians involved in government and having Christian values? Yes. Christian values like what? Thou shalt not steal? Yep. Thou shalt not murder? Yep. Thou shalt not covet? Yep. Or should we say Jewish values, or if they came from the 10 Commandments to the children of Israel, but the moral law, the laws of nature, nature's God? But that doesn't mean we're for a theocracy. It also doesn't mean that the commission of the church, Christians, believers, that's the church, the commission and the Great Commission is not what? The Great Commission is not to establish Christian governments all over the world. Now, if that happens as you preach the gospel and people come into office and defend the life of the unborn and defend traditional marriage and parental authority and the freedom of the pulpit and the airwaves and free speech and freedom of religion, amen. But what is our goal? Is it to build a kingdom on earth? No. We're not to build the kingdom of God on earth. Nowhere. Nowhere. We're to be salt and light. But we're not told to build the kingdom of God on earth. But that's what your post-millennialists are saying. So you see where eschatology and theology matter? So he says, Augustine proposed a view of history that was essentially static, that humans should accept the fallen world as it is, cursed under the weight of sin. But the Puritans read the book of Revelation, listen now, and came away with the view that God was working through his people to effect progress that culminated in the breaking forth of the kingdom. Yeah, when we get our act together, when we work together, which is why they believe we got to work across all theological lines. And I have no problem working across theological lines, but I'm not going to be involved in a spiritual enterprise and look to one God with New Age Mormon and weirdo Glenn Beck. I'm sorry if that's offensive, but the guy is out there. Lest we remember him washing his face with Cheetos and mocking President Trump. And all the other strange things he has said, like there in Texas in the stadium. The Great Awakening, it is here. Really? How's that Great Awakening going, Glenn Beck? Now, I've met Glenn Beck at CPAC. He probably doesn't realize he probably doesn't realize he met me. I agree with Glenn Beck on many things. I disagree with him on some things as well. And I can even agree to partner with people on political issues, policy issues. But I'm sorry, I'm not joining you in a spiritual enterprise to look to one God. Mormons do not worship the same God. Their God is polytheistic, many gods. Every Mormon man can become his own God. Okay? I don't look to the same God as the Muslims either. Not the same God. Their God would never take on human form, die on a cross as God incarnate for the sins of man. Never. Their God is Satan. The description of Satan in the Bible, the description of Allah in the Quran, they're match. But can I agree with people and work with them on political issues, as Francis Schaeffer called co-belligerence? Yeah, but I'm not uniting with you spiritually on some spiritual enterprise. Let's just set that aside. Does that mean I don't talk to them about spiritual things and share the truth of the gospel with them? But publicly, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh yeah, we worship the same God. Yeah, we believe in the same things. Yeah, we worship the same Jesus. No. But now you can see where these groups can now work together because they believe that for the kingdom to come, it has to come through them. Well, the Mormons are working to get their kingdom. I guess they're going to have their New Jerusalem in Missouri. Many so-called Christians, New Apostolic Reformation, Reconstructionists, Dominionists, they all can unite with them because they also believe, many of them, that Israel has been replaced by, the Jews have been replaced by the church. The new Israel is the church. John Piper teaches that. And many of these people wouldn't even agree with John Piper politically, who is a leftist. They believed the Reformation, they believed, was the beginning of the end for this fallen world. Speaking on behalf of the Puritans, this historian, Tevelson wrote, quote, "It is possible that the Reformation was the beginning of a process within history which has led to the establishment of God's kingdom in all the world. If so, it seems almost as if the finger of prophecy must point to this, the best child of the Reformation. Why did Providence hold back the discovery of this vast part of the earth until the very time when the mystical Babylon began to suffer her death pangs?" Really? See, many people, depending on your eschatology, think that a lot of the events of Revelation have already occurred. From the 1630s to the 1750s, Puritan millennialism was the predominant expression of the intersection between theology and nationalism. Then there was a pastor by the name of Samuel Sherwood. He preached a sermon in 1776 based on Revelation 12, verses 14 through 17, entitled, "The Church's Fight into the Wilderness," in which he saw American colonies in similar terms as the church. Following the tradition of the Puritans, Sherwood used symbols or typology to depict the tyrannical King George III and the Church of England as the persecutors of the American colonies. The king in Revelation 12 was the dragon, and the colonies were represented by the woman. Connecticut preacher Nicholas Street, in his 1776 sermon entitled "The American States Acting Over the Part of the Children of Israel in the Wilderness." You see that? The American states acting over the part of the children of Israel in the wilderness. And he saw the colonists in the role of the Israelites of the Exodus, the revolutionary leaders as Moses and Aaron, Britain as Egypt, King George III as Pharaoh, the Red Sea as the military struggle, and victory in the war as the land of Canaan. You see how people just spiritualize stuff? In 1804, that's when John O'Sullivan, founding editor of the Jacksonian periodical, United States Magazine, and Democratic Review, coined one of the most recognizable terms in American history, manifest destiny. In the context of the American annexation of Texas, O'Sullivan wrote that Europe aimed at, quote, "limiting our greatness and checking the fulfillment of our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence for the free development of our yearly multiplying millions," end quote. It was O'Sullivan who was an important figure in the years to the Civil War, a prominent editor, but also a member of the diplomatic corps, having served as the minister to Portugal from 1853 to 1857 under the administration of Franklin Pierce. He was convinced it was the will of God for America, now listen, to overspread the North American continent, and because of this, America's rise to continental dominance was inevitable. Now, if you believe in Christian Reconstructionism, if you believe that you got to build the kingdom of God before you can return, like the New Apostolic Reformation, like the Reconstructionist, like the Dominionist, and if you want to understand everything I'm saying, again, I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can, but if you want to understand everything I'm saying, if you're a member of the Vault, there are hours of radio shows and TV shows I've done on this, or you could just read my book, the coming religious Reich, and the religious Trojan horse. This is a trilogy. Grave Influence, but you don't have to read Grave Influence to understand what I'm talking about now. But you should read Religious Trojan Horse, which came out in 2011, which is all about the new apostolic reformation and these guys that think they're modern-day prophets and apostles establishing the kingdom of God on earth. They also think that they will become what's called the manifest sons of God. There's not only a manifest destiny for some of them, but a manifested sons of God, where they believe that this group of prophets and apostles will become sinless and raise the dead. And then the leaders of the world will rely upon them for how to establish the kingdom of God. That's in Religious Trojan Horse, okay? I think this is out of print, so I don't even know that you can buy it on our store anymore, but you don't have to buy it. It's a part of the vault as an ebook at worldviewtube.com/vault. The second book after that, or the third book of the trilogy, but you only need to read Religious Trojan Horse and the coming religious Reich. Then this one also gets into this idea of world governments and globalism and how you establish a Eurocentric world government. There are many of these people that are united because they share the same eschatology. You see, the Jesuits can get on board with this. What do the Jesuits believe? Well, it's represented in their logo of Georgetown University. The eagle with a cross in one talent and the world in the other. And in Latin, it says, of the two, one. Therefore, a dominionism. 1-800-347-9829. Phone lines now open. Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com. All right, welcome back. 1-800-347-9829. 1-800-347-9829. Your thoughts, your comments, your questions. 1-800-347-9829. Now, I know that when I get into the more deeper stuff like this, fewer people are going to call in because it gets a little more complicated and people are less prone to comment on it. But if you want to weigh in on this, anything I've said, feel free. 1-800-347-9829. 1-800-347-9829. Now, as people push this idea of a manifest destiny 2.0, please understand this. Not the word or the phrase manifest destiny is, again, open to individual ideas and interpretation. That's one of the things you're going to find out when you start studying the idea of a manifest destiny. It is very fluid depending on who you're talking to. So I'm giving you the big picture, and I'm showing you the general ideas or principles of how America needs to grow, go beyond its borders, and maybe even beyond North America to represent a certain value system. American greatness, the American exceptionalism. Right? As we hear. And isn't this really what George W. Bush and nation building and spreading democracy all over the world meant? You see, it means different things to different people. So I'm not putting everybody in the same box. I want to kind of give you the big picture. But we're going to start seeing more and more people buying into this. Now, Corey, it came into the Christian world as this guy writes, in 1977, a book appeared that launched the Christian American movement, The Light and the Glory by Peter Marshall and David Manuel. Now, Peter Marshall spoke for my Worldview Weekends many, many times. I liked Peter. Peter and I did not agree on eschatology, end-time beliefs, but I appreciated a lot of what he had to say about American history. And the book sold hundreds of thousands of copies. But it basically argued that America was God's new Israel, chosen to be the light to the Gentiles. Now, that's very common among Reconstructionists, people like Rushdoony and others I could name. Again, doesn't mean I don't agree with them on many important issues or the great history of America and our founding. But at some point, you have to say, what is their cause? What is their agenda with this information? Why do we agree? Do we agree on this for the same goal or objective? Not always, because some of them are looking for establishing God's kingdom. I'm not. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be the one that builds it. I'm looking for to fulfill the Great Commission. And I want to see the furtherance of Christian values to keep the airwaves open, the pulpits free, to help fulfill the purpose of the church in the Great Commission, the proclamation of the gospel. But I also know that even when the church is persecuted and those freedoms are oftentimes outlawed, we still practice them, but we do so in the face of persecution, which again furthers the gospel. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Bill, line 1 in Wisconsin. Line 1, Bill, thank you for calling in. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi. I would like to read a couple scriptures, and I'll be done real quick.
Okay.
In Romans 2, starting with chapter verse 28, for he is not a Jew which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit and the letter. Then one more concerning Israel. It is not as though the word of God has taken none effect, for they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God. But the children of God of the promise are counted for the seed. They must be born of the Spirit. And this is showing that the new covenant is what they have to come into in order to be saved. And 2/3 of Israel and Judah shall die, and 1/3 shall be the remnant, and they have to come in to the Messiah. They have to come into Jesus. They have to come into Yeshua Messiah, and they will. Then all Israel will be saved.
Amen.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So let me pick up where he's going there. So we teach on this in my series on Hamas. My whole 11 one-hour series on Hamas, I go into what Bill's talking about because I'm correcting the error of John Piper, who says the church is the new Israel. Now, people say, well, gee, the Lord, the resurrected Lord in Revelation refers twice that we know of in the first few chapters to some of these Jews as synagogue of Satan. Therefore, is that a condemnation of all Jews? No, it's not. It's those who are persecuting the new believers, some of them who are Jewish, and they're being persecuted by Jews, and they're mocking the gospel, blaspheming God, and they're going after the new Jewish believers in Yeshua and the Gentiles. So it's a specific group. Now, are they all Jews spiritually speaking? Now, we're not talking physical. We're not talking their DNA. People say, oh, see, even the Bible says they're fake Jews. No, it's not talking about their DNA. It's talking about their spiritual condition, the heart, the circumcision of the heart. It doesn't matter if you are circumcised naturally. Has your heart been circumcised by Christ? Have you received the Lord as your personal Savior? Have you placed your faith and trust in Christ? These will be spiritually the real Jews. And as Bill was saying, then you get 144,000 that are sealed in the tribulation, and those who physically make it alive through the tribulation into the millennium period, they will receive that land covenant. So spiritual. But many will say, but the church is now the new spiritual Israel. No, it's not. That's nowhere in the Bible. They have to twist the scriptures to get there. Let's go to Dennis, line 4. Hi, Dennis, line 4.
Brannon, Dennis from Independence.
I'm definitely not a prophet, because last time I called you, I said that Michelle Obama would be the next president. So I'm definitely not a prophet. I thought that would be the thing. But I do live in Independence, Missouri. I can see the temple from art school and stuff. But I was born Baptist, into the Baptist stuff and whatever, but I went away from the church, and I hated God. I hated the Bible, everything else. And I met my wife from Nebraska. She was Lutheran. I became Lutheran. And even my grandmother showed up, and they had a dance. We drank. We did all stuff. But my grandmother said, I prayed for you to get back in church. And now I actually read the Bible and study, and I go to Bible. And I'm learning through this stuff and whatever. I'm trying to teach my wife now, too, about the rapture and the things come and eschatology, whatever. And it's really tough, because when you're growing up in that thing.
I wish I had more time, Dennis. I'm out of time. Thank you, Dennis.
This has been Worldview Radio.
All right, that's our broadcast. I wish we had more time for Dennis's story right there in Independence, Missouri, where there's going to be the New Jerusalem, according to the Mormon. And Jeff from Oklahoma wanted to make a comment. Well, again, this is a deep program, I know, but it's vital that we are willing to gird up the loins of our minds, if you will, and understand these things, because otherwise you're going to be like many in the MAGA movement. There are many, many, many in the MAGA movement. They're not students. They are rally goers. They are rally goers and they are cheerleaders. But they're not students. And if you are not a student who can rightfully divide the word of truth, then the Bible says you're going to be tossed to and fro by the cunningness and craftiness of men in their deceitful scheming. Important to be a student, an approved workman who needeth not be ashamed, rightfully dividing the word of God, right? So your end-time belief matters, your eschatology, your theology matters, and of course we know your belief of what is salvation matters. Your view of who Jesus is, the right gospel. So this is very important. So when people talk about manifest destiny, just know that not everybody's going to have the same idea of what that means. You're going to have to ask them, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And find out, how deep do they go on manifest destiny? Oh, I just believe in the expansion of America. Or maybe they don't even believe in the expansion of America. Maybe they just believe in the expansion of American ideals to other nations. Basically, we're going to be involved in nation building and making it a kind of a model after America. Well, is that really our objective? Is that really the objective of both Christians and even non-Christians in America? That's not really our objective. And we get too involved in nation building thinking, well, we got to spread freedom and democracy. And then we just end up making a mess, whether it be Afghanistan, Iraq, a lot of wasted money, and sacrificed lives. And then, of course, the people that did survive who are maimed for life. I see these commercials, and they break my heart when I see these commercials on TV for all the wounded vets. And I think, for what? For what? We should have never been over there. There was no national interest. This was more of this nation building and more of this George W. Bush to what? To spread democracy. Go back and listen to the speeches of George W. Who was writing those speeches? What was their belief? Where's the national interest? Oh, yeah, 9/11. You got Saudi Arabia and Iran involved. Saudi Arabia and Iran involved, but let's go invade Iraq. Really? Was that really about that, or was that about oil? Was that about minerals? Was that about nation building? What was that about? Well, very important to ask people, what do you mean by manifest destiny? Some of them will not mean, oh, I don't think we need to go beyond our borders. Others will say, yeah, I think we should. Others will say, I just think we should export our beliefs and create basically little mini Americas around the world until we have liberty and freedom, as though somehow America is the moral standard. Really? America is the moral standard for the world. I don't think so. I'm sad to say. But many, many people have no clue what I'm talking about today in the MAGA movement. Let's see if we can educate people so that we don't see so many cheerleaders and rally goers cheering what's really globalism. Because if we really go to a North American Union, you're not America first anymore. And what's going to be really interesting is the number of people who think they're MAGA and America first that will be actually trashing those of us who actually are America first. Those of us who actually know what we believe, why we believe it, have been students of both the Bible and students of public policy and history, will be the real America first people, being criticized by a bunch of junior high students who are great at slogans and rallies and being cheerleaders, and they have no basis or understanding by which to criticize us. But isn't that the way it is? They don't know the issues, but they attack the people that disagree with them because in their ignorance, they somehow have set you up as the enemy. When reality is, you're not. You're the one trying to say, don't be a useful idiot. Don't let the globalists come in and hijack the America First MAGA movement and have you guys out there cheerleading for a North American Union because certain people are saying that's what is a good idea. Now, again, I'm not so sure Donald Trump thinks that's a good idea. Donald Trump may be just starting at a negotiating point, right, for his objectives, and we'll see what those are. But don't underestimate the globalists to get in here, put these ideas out there to divide the MAGA crowd and the America First crowd so that many of the wonderful things that need to be done and have been proposed by Donald Trump never happen. So the bottom line is we have to understand the worldview picture. The worldview picture. Understand the big picture of what's happening and be ready to talk about it from facts, not from political slogans or just following personalities. And sometimes we can disagree with people we really like and respect. We can disagree because that's what's best for our own country, right? All right. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan, and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
In a recent interview published on January 6, 2025, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump emphasized the critical need to revitalize America's naval shipbuilding industry, highlighting the Constellation-class frigates as both a success and a missed opportunity. Trump's remarks shed light on the challenges that have slowed the production of these advanced warships and the broader issues facing the shipbuilding sector. The Constellation-class frigates were developed under Trump's administration to fill critical gaps in the U.S. Navy's fleet. These warships, designed for anti-submarine warfare, escort missions, and maritime security, offer a versatile and cost-effective solution alongside the Navy's larger destroyers. Built by Fincantieri Marinette Marine in Wisconsin, the program was intended to showcase the capabilities of American shipyards and strengthen the domestic defense industry. However, Trump expressed frustration over changes to the ship's design after his administration. Alterations, such as the widening of the hull, were made after the program's inception, which he argues negatively impacted the frigate's speed and efficiency. This situation highlights broader concerns about inefficiencies in the defense procurement process, where late-stage design changes disrupt production schedules, delay timelines, and drive up costs. Trump pointed to the need for discipline in sticking to the original plans for such critical defense programs. He compared the current pace of shipbuilding to the rapid production capabilities during World War II, when shipyards like Bath Iron Works in Maine produced destroyers every 17 days. In contrast, today's shipyards are only averaging about 1.5 ships per year, which Trump views as a stark contrast and unacceptable in a world of growing global threats. Another issue Trump raised was the lack of adequate infrastructure to support shipbuilding efforts. He criticized the closure of key shipyard facilities under the current administration, which he claims has hindered the Navy's readiness. Trump called for increased investment in shipyard infrastructure, including new docks and expanded production lines, to ensure the U.S. can maintain a competitive edge in naval power. Trump also suggested that outsourcing shipbuilding contracts to foreign manufacturers could be a temporary solution to fill the gap while U.S. shipyards ramp up production capacity. This approach would allow the Navy to continue receiving the ships it needs while the domestic shipbuilding industry rebuilds its capabilities. As the U.S. Navy aims for a 330-ship fleet, the need for programs like the Constellation-class frigates has become even more urgent, especially with rival powers such as China rapidly expanding their maritime capabilities. The timely delivery of these warships is critical to maintaining the Navy's operational readiness and ensuring national security in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. In conclusion, Trump's remarks underscore the need for a renewed focus on America's naval shipbuilding industry. By addressing inefficiencies, investing in infrastructure, and sticking to original designs, the U.S. can rebuild its shipbuilding capabilities and ensure that the Navy remains strong and capable of meeting the challenges of the future. The Constellation-class frigates are a key part of that.
President-elect Trump's focus on U.S. Navy shipbuilding and other shipbuilding is the truth. And that's why we're talking about it on Truth Thursday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, X-Space's simulcast, and our Truth Social Plus live stream. So China has the largest Navy in the world, folks. You heard me right. And it continues ramping up its military with weapons capable of reaching the United States and strategically important assets abroad all around the world. The incoming Trump administration has to put a priority on strengthening our military, particularly our Navy and merchant marine shipbuilding, to deter China. And President Trump's recent comments indicate that they will, because he and his appointees understand the issue. But that's only the beginning, however. We must eventually expand our shipyard capabilities and in the interim find innovative ways to rapidly expand our shipbuilding capacity outside of our shores. Reshoring requires finding the funding too and building more infrastructure at existing yards, plus creating new shipyard manufacturers while increasing our workforce and securing vital material supply chains. And today we're speaking with the president of Supply Chain Management Incorporated One, a contractor in the engineering and workforce development space. SCM1 President Naveen Anamolo is a Harvard Business School executive alumni, engineer, and an entrepreneur. He runs a federal government contracting business that's focused on engineering services with the United States Navy and the Department of Defense. Naveen was born in the United States and is of Indian descent. His dad was the first Indian American recognized in the U.S. Congress for Homeland Security. Naveen believes in the American dream, like I do, and also believes there's tremendous waste in our system and government, and is committed to fighting to keep the American dream alive for all Americans first. All Americans first. And that's what's important here. Naveen, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. And I just want to say thank you for your service to our country. Because of you, we're safe.
Well, thank you. Thank you for yours. As a matter of fact, why don't you tell the audience before we dive into the detail about how you and I are going to fix shipbuilding in the United States, about your background and what led you to make a decision to start this company, because you founded this company, Supply Chain Management.
Correct. So a little bit about my background. From Long Island, New York. My father was an immigrant from India, and actually my father is the inspiration for me getting into this. As an immigrant, he came here, got his U.S. citizenship, ended up working in the defense sector, and he opened a federal government contracting business. He wasn't so big in the Navy initially. He was more involved in Homeland Security. He was the first Indian American to be recognized in U.S. Congress for Homeland Security. And I saw that he was serving. And, I tell this story to everyone. When I was 18 years old, I wanted to serve. And so I went to, the local recruiter. Actually, I went to a friend of mine, and I said, I want to serve. I want to go in the Navy. He showed me a boot camp of Navy SEALs. And I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna get my butt kicked. So I said, okay, you know what? Forget about it. So then I went to, a friend of mine who happened to be in the Army. He showed me, for some reason they showed me the hardest one. So, he showed me, Army boot camp. And I'm like, all right, I don't know. So I'm a little bit of a nerd. I said, okay, let me go to Air Force. And long story short, I went in, recruiter, everything was good. Walked out. I had asthma, so I took a pump from my asthma inhaler and got ripped up the paperwork. He's like, you can't go. So, but ever since then, I said I serve this country, and so it's been my dream to do that. And so I saw my father doing it. I said, let me open a business, let me do this. And I started seeing some of the challenges in our DoD, especially. And, I started seeing a lot of craziness with the military industrial complex and things like that. And I said, you know what, I want to get in here, change this, show them how to do it right, and provide good value. And so I started my company doing that.
So your company is not just focused on engineering. I think I mentioned some workforce development. You do some work in that area too, but there's other spaces that you operate in. What is its focus in a broad way strategically as a federal contractor beyond the Navy? Before we dive into the ship stuff, I want folks to know about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm focused on adding value. I mean, I have private sector clients as well. We're providing good resources, U.S. citizens and green card holders only, focused on U.S. citizens mainly, helping those people to get placed in the right position. But I'm not a staffing company. I actually provide them mentorship, guidance, training. Most of my staff, I would say 95% of my staff are retired veterans, because veterans are the people that are kicked to the curb, even though they're the ones that serve us and do everything. They're kicked to the curb. And so I always say, hey, I kind of take veterans first and say I'd rather have the veteran, on my staff. And I'm sorry, to other people who are sitting, but hey, you're a veteran, you served. I need you on my team because you understand what it's like to handle rejection and handle problems, and you can easily solve problems. So in most cases that works out. So I always take veterans, but that's my focus is, providing solutions. And in the Navy space, I do ship maintenance, HM&E support, submarine design, submarine build. I support some contracts of submarine build, ship, like I said, ship assessments, administrative, logistics support, all across the world. And, I'm able to see some of the craziness that happens in the government contracting world on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I want to make sure I give you a chance to delve into a little bit, because you're the defense industry is divided into the bigs and the smalls. There really aren't any mediums at this point, and you guys are a small. So from your perspective, one of the things we have to do in the ship manufacturing space for the Navy and Merchant Marines really is figure out how do we expand our capabilities for our existing shipyards, and then incentivize capital to come in and help create new ship manufacturing companies, because we need to not only expand our capabilities in existing shipyards, we have to have new ones. You don't build 17 destroyers a day like Bath Iron Works was doing unless you have a huge supply chain that's very reliable, that's secure, unless you have a workforce that's available and trained and has enough experience to be able to bring young folks in and get them through apprenticeships and become journeymen and those kind of things. So we know there are problems because the United States can't build more than 1.5 ships a year on the Navy side, and on the Merchant Marine side, which is part of the Navy, it's about 5, which is incredibly small number when you look at China. And we'll see some numbers thrown around about the Chinese Navy during the clips for the show. So from your small company perspective and your experience working with the Navy, and you said you're doing submarine design, so that's shipbuilding, really. Yep. I know they're called boats, guys, gals in the Navy. I understand that, but that is part of this manufacturing process that we have to rebuild and reshore eventually. So from your perspective, what are the things that could be done to change things, to bring in more innovation and create more companies like yours, or give your companies like yours more maneuvering room to be able to have a more positive impact on the procurement process and the manufacturing process for the U.S. Navy?
Yeah, and you bring up some great points. I mean, look, they always say when you're talking about presidential administrations, they always say people is policy. Well, or policy is based on the people you bring in. Well, it's the same thing here with the workforce. You highlighted workforce, and I know everyone talks about the supply chain. Look, we can solve the supply chain. It's literally just buying something and bringing it in. But if you don't have the right people to do the work, you're not going to be able to succeed. So what I always tell people is, and this is my focus, I tell customers of mine, I've gone to Groton, Connecticut, I've gone to Kings Bay, Georgia, and other places, and I'm telling them, and these are submarine bases for those who don't know, I've gone to these places, I've spoken with commanders, I've spoken with others, and I say, look, you need the right personnel. The problem is when you bring the bigs in, like Lockheed's and all these guys, and I'm not singling out Lockheed, but you bring in these big companies, what happens is there's tons of waste. And so while they get people at high salaries, what happens is they have trouble maintaining those people because their margins are all skewed, right? And so the government then says, oh, I'm bringing in a big. Well, let me let Lockheed handle the distribution of the supply. Let me have them buy the material. Okay, well then what do? They go and say, okay, I'm going to buy the material at a higher rate because they don't know how to negotiate, right? So they say, okay, I'm going to buy this from a foreign country. It's asinine. The Navy or the federal government or President Trump in this case should be negotiating that and saying, hey, this is what we're going to buy the steel from, or this is what we're going to get here to, this is how we're going to design the hull. Here's where we're going to get all the pieces of the supply chain. And the personnel should be the focus. So allowing more small businesses and forcing small businesses to be in to provide you the personnel and letting the Navy or DOD take control of the supply chain will change the entire gamut. But when you rely on a big to do the entire, these large businesses, what happens is you get fraud and waste. I'm telling you, honestly, they'll buy something, for example, maybe for $5, right? And they'll charge the Navy $15. By the time the Navy gets it, right, the item is damaged or it's not working properly. A quick example I can give you, I had a contract over at Kings Bay, Georgia. I was a subcontractor on it. And but I was in charge of running it for the Prime. And the Prime was also a small business. And they basically were building a new, we were doing the QA oversight. They were building a brand new dry dock for the Columbia-class submarine. And this is public information. So Columbia-class submarine over at in Kings Bay. And right. So the dry dock, we were doing the oversight for the general contractor. And guess what? The general contractor, the last, I would say, maybe 1 month before the contract was done, was supposed to build these doors. There's doors for a dry dock. So they were supposed to put these doors on. And in the contract, it says Buy American. Well, guess what they did? And they're a big construction company. I don't want to mention their name, but very big. And what they did, they bought from China the doors, okay, and brought them in and expected the Navy not to see it because the Navy didn't. They just go, I'm paying millions. They charged the Navy for the U.S. one, but bought it from China because it was cheaper and was going to install it until our team caught it, saw it, and said, hey, these are from China when the box came. And they said, and they were like, oh, sorry, the manufacturer must have messed up. Well, it's too late to cancel the contract. So they just, what did they do? They paid them for that and then paid them again to buy the American ones. Amazing. And so then they had to return they didn't return the China one, they just kept it or whatever they did with it. But it's just like, that's waste, right? And that's gaming the system when you're going for profits and you're not really looking for quality of support. And by the way, the fact is there shouldn't have even been a quality contract to do oversight for it if the contractor is doing their job properly. That's the fact. So the fact that they had to issue another contract to have someone do it is a problem.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, we got to take a commercial break. I want to keep talking about this, though, because finding the funding to do things like what we're talking about, expanding existing shipyard capability and incentivizing new shipyard manufacturers to be created and finding the capital for them is crucially important. But there's no appetite really in Congress to increase defense spending. So we're going to have to find the dollars. And we're talking with Naveen Anamolo. And we're talking about small contractors working in the defense industry, help them build ships, submarines, working in the fleet, and that relationship and how we can make it better so that we can do the things that President Trump's team says we need to do, which is get our Navy and our merchant marine fleets back on track with manufacturing and manned and operating so we can deter the big enemy, the big adversary, the real one, the Communist Party of China. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
I want to take a look at the Chinese military growth because it's staggering, according to the Defense Department. Just look at the numbers. They've got 50 new intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of striking the continental U.S. The cumulative total, by the way, is now 400. 600 plus operational nuclear warheads projected to surpass 1,000 by 2030. And the largest navy in the world with 370 ships and submarines expected to grow to 435 by 2030.
All those numbers, the other thing is the trend line is all going up, and not in some small fashion and gradual fashion, but going up in a very large way. Another number to kind of draw attention to is the 300 additional medium-range ballistic missiles that are primarily used to go after U.S. Navy warships like the aircraft carrier, but also attack our homeland in Guam, where over 100,000 U.S. citizens and very strategically important bases are located. But for the U.S., for the last 20 years, the Navy has not been able to grow in any meaningful fashion. We're still below 300 ships. The last time we were above that was in 2003. So we have a long way to go. The Chinese are not slowing down, and they certainly are not going to be deterred until we actually strengthen our military.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and the truth is, you just heard it right there from Brent Sadler, I believe is who was speaking there, a naval strategy expert, and that is China is not going to be deterred unless we have the right size of the United States Navy and we have the right amount and right size of the U.S. merchant marine fleet that gives us the ability to protect our logistics lines of communication, to disperse our forces so they can't be attacked all at one time on one tiny island like the island of Guam with 2 or 3 installations on it. And those kind of things. And we're talking with Naveen Anamolo today, president of SMC Inc. 1, who is involved in taking care of the fleet, the U.S. Navy fleet, submarine design with his company and his background as a small defense contractor. And Naveen, we were talking before the break about waste and saving money. And I want to continue that conversation. But first, let's take a question from our live audience. We've got a hand up over there. Go ahead, Rob. Patriot Rob is our host today.
We have Liz, Colonel.
Hi, Colonel. How are you today?
Good.
I just was wondering, I know that at one point Newport News, Virginia, was a big shipbuilding center. Could that be retrofitted and amped up for this purpose?
That's a great question, Naveen, since we're talking about expanding capability.
Yeah, it can be. Look, right now, all the contracts and all the work that they're doing is maintaining what we have. And while that's good, right, it's been degraded in its ability to be able to create new product. And I think that's the problem. When you want to build new ships, you need to really amp it up. You need to tell the suppliers to come close by. They'll build facilities right there. They'll rent. But all of those facilities have been. So Newport News has the ability to be one of the central hubs. And they were at one point. I mean, they were one of the number one Newport News, Groton, Connecticut, these were the two places where everything on the East Coast happened. Okay, all the ships were built, they were ready to go. You had submarines also nearby there. You had Kings Bay for submarines as well. You had the West Coast, and these places were great. Now in the new construction area, it's like a graveyard. And so everyone is just focused on what they call ship readiness assessments. Okay, is this ship good? Let's maintain what we have. It's kind of like your car is broken, but you keep sending it in. You don't get the new car because you're like, who wants to get the new car? My car's got 200,000 miles on it. It's okay. I can still use it. At some point, you got to change that. And President Trump made it a point to change that during his administration. And so he was able to get some new ships. So in San Diego and a few other areas, they started building new ships. What happened? As soon as he left, and look, this is going to sound political for those people looking at this, but I will just be honest and say this. It's almost like Joe Biden said, hey, stop doing that. We need to send the money to Ukraine. And it's like, okay, we need to help them build their ships and so that they can defend themselves, which in my opinion is an America last approach. But that's my view on that. So.
Well, that's why President Trump just won overwhelmingly in the Electoral College. He's certified now. He won the popular vote. No Republicans won the popular vote in many decades now. So, I mean, the American people voted and said the last administration's approach to most things, I think all things really, when you look at the big ticket items, was the wrong approach. And I think that's why that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on the show was to get some viewpoints out there, because I could probably get somebody from Raytheon or the bigs to come into the show and talk about that. And we have lots of footage about them and their folks that they rely on to tell their part of the story. But the part of the story that's got to be told is what you're talking about. You just talked about getting the primes to be closer to the locations. That Newport News was once a huge shipbuilding location that could still be reactivated and maybe expanded in capability, but we have to have the right approach to do it, right? So you mentioned that DOD should take over security of the supply chain and operating that piece of this. What would it look like for the small contractors to wade into expanding our capability inside our shores? And at the same time, what does it look like in the near term? President Trump's talked about getting our allies to help us increase our capacity in the short term. What do those two things look like, Naveen?
Well, there is a slight danger in doing that. And I'm not challenging President Trump on it, but when you get our allies to help us, it's like you bring a foreign car in, right? If you don't, if they're building it to our spec, you're basically going to say, hey, I want you to build this to our spec. You're giving away critical information, critical designs on how our ships are done to a foreign entity. I understand they'll be locked down. Our people will be there watching them. But the fact is there'll be people in those countries that understand. A lot of them are U.S. citizens, but they'll be over there with that knowledge on how to do it. Those foreign countries may also have their people there. So they'll, so I have hesitation for that. I understand why he's saying to do that, because right now we need to get these new, like I said, you need to get the new cars in quickly before you can start building your own, because it'll take you a long time to get up to speed. What we need the primes, the large businesses, to come together and say, hey, you know what? We are all committed to this. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all of these companies need to come, and there's more, but they need to come together and say, you know what, we're going to unify together, and we're going to make sure that, you know what, we open facilities in Newport News. We're going to make it easier for the government to do it. Instead, what they wanted, they love the maintenance contracts, because the reason they love the maintenance is they can spend a ton of money. I don't want to curse, but they can spend a ton of money and charge them for maintaining. It's just like this. You go to the mechanic shop, right? I went to the mechanic shop today for my car, right? And they'll charge you a ton of money. But when you get something new, you really don't get to charge that maintenance until after a couple of 3-4 years, when it really starts getting wear and tear if it's built right. And so they're more focused on that. If they unify together and do it. Now, small businesses have to be heavily focused on getting the right people, not getting a person, getting the right people. And that requires training. And so DOD should also be committed to say, look, we have a knowledge base. Let's work with our small businesses. Let's train the small businesses, their management, their executives. Let them understand this now. So let's trust them the way we put all our trust in Lockheed's and others. Let's train them and say, here, how do you do this so that we could train our staff and we can provide, because if they did that, I could guarantee you today, I could get 600 new people ready to build ships today. If they came and said, hey, we're going to put a class together, Naveen, you come down, bring a couple of your corporate employees down here, I would be able to train the trainer and make sure those people are ready to go. That would be huge. And that is the investment that we all need to do. The government is even, and I don't mean to divert the topic, Colonel, but I will say this, the government is even talking about, hey, if we can bring in H-1Bs and others in here, train them on AI and all this stuff, and then give them citizenship, we can have them work for us. And that's sad because nobody is thinking to say, hey, let's start training our people, making sure they're capable. And then if we have to, in an absolute need someone who has an advanced thinking at a certain level, let's bring in a general from another country, convert him, flip him to our side and do. That's warfare. But, we should do that kind of stuff. If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, the H-1B issue is, and I think the president, from what I've heard him say, agrees with Musk about using those kind of programs, but they have to be fixed. I mean, they've been abused, and they're America last at this point. So maybe throw the whole thing out and start over. I don't know, but we have Americans that can be trained to do this stuff, and we have capabilities like training welders and ship fitters and those kind of things. I live in Gulfport, Mississippi, and we have Ingalls Shipbuilding and a whole host of other smaller shipyards down here. And we have community colleges that do shipfitting classes. As a matter of fact, my son and I took one together just to see what it was like when he thought he was interested in learning to do shipfitting welding and those kind of things. So those could be expanded too. We've got to do that. And let's talk a little bit more about that when we come back from this break, because we'll see on the opening clip what China's shipbuilding capability is for its Navy. And we're in just as bad a shape there as we are on the merchant marine side, folks. For every one of ours on the merchant marine side, they can build 340 ships in the People's Republic of China. We'll be right back with Naveen Adamolo talking about how do we get innovative and fix our ship manufacturing problem, both in the near term and the long term, so that we can eventually be in the right position to deter China and prevent a wider World War III. I'll be right back on Worldview Tube.
Hello, I'm Brannon Howse. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
In modern history, global power has been determined by naval power, and naval power has been determined by who has the most ships. And you go back to 1943, we built over 18,000 naval vessels in 1 year. Do you know how many we built last year?
I guess it's in the tens.
8.
Wow, that's even less.
And we retired 12. We're -4 in a peacetime environment. Now you overlay that with what the Chinese have done over the last 30 years.
They're building hundreds or thousands a year.
They have 250 times our shipbuilding capacity, and they have 50% of the world's shipbuilding capacity. That means if you got the entire world teamed up against China, you're only at parity.
Wow.
That's scary, and that's a lot of power to be concentrated in any one country. And that's why we're building what we're building, and that's why we're building it so fast.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and you just heard some more truth there. You know, even if you combined all the world's shipbuilding capacity together, it still is just at parity with what China is capable of producing. And their Navy, as we've said already, is larger than the United States Navy already. Their quality is pretty darn good. You'll see another clip in the last segment that shows their newest aircraft carrier, and we are behind. And here's the problem with that. The problem with that isn't that we want to go fight a war with China. The problem with that is that we want to deter a war from happening, and we want to deter World War III from breaking out because we are not able to stand up to them and prevent them from taking away our freedom by their various hegemonic programs that they have put in place and that they're building to be able to fully implement all around the globe. And my guest today is the president of Supply Chain Management Inc. 1, and they're involved as a Navy and federal contractor in fleet support and submarine design. And we're discussing how we can increase our ship manufacturing, our workforce, and get back to the capability to build Navy ships and merchant marine ships so that we can actually deter China. And Naveen, you can't deter China unless you can control your logistics lines of communication in the Pacific Ocean. And we are not capable of doing that today.
Yeah, and you know, Colonel, one thing also very important. We have Guam. How many, you know, shipbuilding in Guam and Pearl Harbor it's mind-boggling, but those should be the areas where the most shipbuilding is happening, the most submarine building is happening. All of that should be happening out there. It's not. We should be investing in, you know, 3D modeling, okay? Putting this stuff together. We should be investing in personnel, as we discussed. You know, everyone's looking at cost optimization. Sure, costs may go up if it's built in the U.S., but you have more control if it's built in the U.S. I'd rather invest money on a ship made in the U.S. or made using United States steel, United States products, than stuff that comes from other nations and you're trying to put it together. These are all things that have to change. But when it comes to China, you want to combat China. The number one thing the DoD needs to do is build up their fleet in Pearl Harbor and build up their fleet in Guam. If you think about World War II, you know, Japan was smart. I mean, I'm not, you know, obviously condoning Japan, but they were smart. They looked at Pearl Harbor and they said, holy F, they have a huge fleet here. If we want to decimate the U.S., and the problem is the U.S. put all their effort and they built a huge fleet over there, but they weren't building as much. I mean, they were, but not as much as they could have over on the East Coast and other areas, or on the West Coast, better said. The East Coast they were building. But, you know, it became an issue where Japan said, hey, let's knock them out. If we knock them out, they thought we'll destroy their naval power. They were wrong, but they thought they would destroy us. But we're nowhere near that today. I mean, today, if China's Navy came against our Navy, I mean, sure, we have better long-range missiles. We have other fighters. If you take our entire military, yeah, we would destroy them with planes and other stuff. But if it was just Navy versus Navy, you know, I'm not sure how we would fare on it. And the other thing that's very interesting, Colonel, and you know, I was just reading about it the other day. So many countries understand the process for how our ships are built. They understand the components of our ship. Isn't that a national security threat that they know, okay, the console is in the top corner here. Okay, the console has these buttons. Okay, the hull is in the, I mean, why should they know do we know how Russia's ships are built? Probably not, because they're building their own, right? So why should we let other countries know the components of ours? Because we're being fickle on that. But man, we're spending like crazy for Zelensky suits. I mean, it's crazy, you know?
Well, that's why it's so important to reshore our manufacturing. I'm not opposed to having shipyards in Guam, but I am opposed to not having enough facilities dispersed so Guam becomes a singular target that makes it easy. And I'm opposed to not having enough sea lift capability to be able to control those logistics lines of communication. You know, and the manufacturing base that we had pre-World War II is what did that for us. It existed. before World War II broke out. That's what the Japanese misjudged. They only looked at the military capability. They didn't really look deep enough into the U.S. capability itself. And it wasn't a defensive industrial complex manufacturing. It was the entire manufacturing capability. That's why this whole idea about getting our allies to help us has got to be short term. And in the long term, we have to reshore this manufacturing and reshore our materials production, right? I mean, there's a push to have, I think, Nippon to buy U.S. steel. And I think President Trump supported that in his last administration. But is that really the right thing to do versus, helping incentivize investors to reinvest in U.S. steel and get it going again so that it's producing the materials for our shipping?
Yeah, no, and you know what? I will say this. It's also kind of crazy because the Biden administration wanted to invest in electric-powered ships. Now, give me that again. They wanted to invest in electric-powered ships. They wanted solar ships. They wanted to be. I'm like, this is not where you invested that crap. Like, you want to do all that. I mean, I'm not calling it crap. You like that? Fine. But, you have to be afraid, we're going to cut the cost of gas. We're going to cut. No, don't cut. When it comes to defense, you don't cut. You got to spend. You got to be able to do it. And so, I agree with you, sir. We have to bring everything back onto our shores. We have to double down on that. And we have to double down on personnel. Again, if you trained everyone in Newport, actually at one point, Newport News, sir, and most of Virginia was considered like a naval or DOD state. It was like, if you were there, you worked for the government, you worked for DOD, you worked for the Navy. Now, if you go there, you see a bunch of surfers or other kind of people in the summers, and you're like, what the hell's going on here? Like, who are these people? And there's a shipyard, of course. There's people that work there. There's ships that come in. I mean, it's not like it's desolate, but, there needs to be more work on readiness to fight rather than maintaining our current readiness. And it's very different. And I think that function will change. You were right about President Trump saying that in his first term about Nippon buying it, but I think he said he was going to veto it if it came to him, and he was going to be against it. Now because he wants American steel to be stronger, but he does want an investment into American steel from outside just to get the money coming in. It's very dangerous when you do that foreign investment, sir, because it depends on what you give them. And that's why I only trust Donald Trump to do it, because he knows, hey, as much as they try to screw him, he's screwing them back. So that's how that works.
Well, we've got to take a new approach that is like that. We've got hands over in the audience, Naveen. Let's go ahead and take a question real quick. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, Colonel, we have Wib. Go ahead, Wib.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Colonel. My question is almost twofold. The first one is, how much competition is there between the Navy and the Merchant Marine for keel space in the shipyards? And the second one is, and the second part of that is, how often is our gap assessment or readiness for fleet readiness, has it been done recently with the advent of drones and so forth and all that technology to kind of retool what we might need?
Great questions.
This is a very good question. So I think the Merchant Marine and the Navy, there's always going to be a conflict between them. The Navy tries to control where those ships are, the Merchant Marine ships. And I think Merchant Marine has a smaller latitude in terms of what they can do in their ships and the purpose of their ships. The Navy ships are more of the ready to fight ships. I think there's room for both of them, but I would like more investment into the Navy ships, to really the fighter ships, the DDGs, the submarines, those kinds of things, the Litter class and things like that. There's just got to be more investment into newer ships like that. As far as your second question about readiness, fleet readiness is done a lot. I mean, I have a contract where I'm constantly doing fleet readiness. But like I said, you're always making sure, is the car ready to go, right? And so the mechanic says, yeah, it's good. He keeps doing an inspection. And you're like, yes, my car got past the inspection. Okay, let me go out, and But that doesn't mean that it's ready. Does that make sense? It means that, it passed whatever the threshold that they have is, but it doesn't mean it's not going to break down. And so we invest so much, like I said, we have regional maintenance centers all across the country that are maintaining these ships and making sure they're good. And ships come in, they dock, they get fixed up, and then they leave. So our fleet readiness, I would say, is pretty good based upon what we have. The problem is we're not bringing in a new flow of ships in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and are we to get another aspect of Wibb's question about drones and defending against that capability, or using that capability as offensively from our current fleet, from a readiness perspective, are we ready for that? It's hard to tell from an unclassified perspective, but you work with refits and readiness assessments and those kind of things. Are we ready to do that kind of work if we're challenged at sea and on our land bases, or do we have more work to do?
So do you, let me preface the question. Are you saying utilizing drones to help fix the issues that we have? Or are you talking about utilizing drones to kind of assess the area and launching the drones from the ships?
Well, if our focus in ship manufacturing is maintaining what we currently have, are we able to look forward as new threats approach, like the drone threat that's come out? One of the things from the Ukraine-Russia war is the combat capability of using drones for your air and sea power, as opposed to using manned vehicles. It's a lot less expensive. You can get more of them. So if we're focused on just maintaining what we have, if you're looking at an Arleigh Burke destroyer and you're maintaining what it has, it wasn't designed to defend against that or to use those types of capabilities offensively. Is there a program to look at that and assess that, and then put new capability to defend and offensively use those types of activities?
Yeah, we have money invested into those capabilities. The problem with those systems is there's not an understanding on how those drones will operate efficiently when we deploy them. So an example, a lot of the generals and admirals and others who are there today, I'm not knocking them. I mean, these are all, there's not a trustworthiness that the drone will do the job you need. So we're more selling our drones, believe it or not, we're selling more of our drones than using them to our allies, because we're like, well, we don't know if this is going to work, but hey, Ukraine, you use it, or, Pakistan, you use it, or whoever, you use it, and they may have success or failure. We're almost like testing it with them, how they use it. I think we have that capability to do it. What's interesting is there is a push also to utilize AI and drones to also fix the ships in sea, so that, when you have issues, you don't have to bring it back to shore or bring it back to a base and try to have it fixed. And that takes a long time. So, so what they're trying to do is, hey, let's get a robot or a drone and have them fix those issues, or at least assess the issues quickly. Again, right, that's great, but there's always going to be things missed. And so, I think if we rely too much on it, and I think the Biden administration has tried to do that, relied a lot on it, you've lost the human understanding of what's going on. And that's why I'm saying it's about getting right now, we should triple the personnel we have. I understand there's technology there. We should triple the personnel we have that has this knowledge and understanding. And then those people can make sure that these systems are implemented properly so that we can have the best technology moving forward.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we've got to take our last break, Naveen. When we come back, we'll see a little clip again. And I'm harping on this, but can we fix our shipbuilding is the focus of this last segment. And where do we find the money? So I want to get your take on DOGE and what your hopes or your skepticism is about that program. We'll be right back on the Rob Maynard Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we're putting a lot of truth down about the United States Navy and our merchant marine fleet and our ship manufacturing capability right now. We'll be right back.
All right, everybody, we're coming to the top of the hour.
On China's east coast, just off Shanghai, there's a shipyard so huge that it has more capacity than all the shipyards in America. It's called Jiangnan. It's a joint military and civilian site that's common in China, and it recently launched China's newest aircraft carrier. This is part of a problem so big for America that it could decide its future role in Asia. You see, Jiangnan is just one facility. Taken together, China has 230 times the shipbuilding capacity of the United States. You heard that right, 230 times. That was revealed in a leak from a US Navy presentation. China's Navy is already bigger than America's. With this huge difference in capacity, it could soon pull even further ahead. This could make it impossible for the United States to defend Taiwan, for instance, against a Chinese invasion, or to stand by the Philippines in the case of aggression by China in the South China Sea. That could lead to a collapse in American power and influence in Asia. This is now Donald Trump's problem, and experts say he'll need help.
Oh, it's a very, very serious problem, and the United States is going to have to also rely on Japanese and Korean allies to get allied shipbuilding up to anywhere close to where China is.
The argument goes that if the US can both beef up its own capacity and tie its allies closer together, it'll have a much greater chance of success.
Rebuilding the defense industrial base in the United States is going to be key. Number two is taking some of these mini-lateral alliances that we've built in the Asia Pacific and weaving that into something more like a collective alliance.
In his first term, Trump had a rough relationship with allies. He saw many of them as freeloaders. Now that he could use their help with China, the question is, are there deals to be done?
Welcome back to the Rob Maida Show. It's Truth Thursday, and we are telling the truth about the capability of the United States Navy, our merchant marine fleet, and our inability to really be ready enough to be able to deter China at this point in our existence. And that's just the flat-out truth. Our guest is Naveen Anamalo, who runs a company that it's a federal contractor that does fleet service, submarine design, and those kind of things. And Naveen, that is the big question. You hear this in every clip that an American's speaking about, well, we have to increase this. We have to increase that. We've got to build this infrastructure and get it going again because we can't just rely on our allies. And you're right. That's a risky operation. It's got to only be in the short term. We've got to return these capabilities back to the United States. And I disagree with what the man in the clip said about the defense industrial base. We've got to increase our manufacturing capability inside the United States again to where we were at making things pre-World War II. That's what saved us in World War II. And that's what will deter countries like China, which is really the big adversary. And we need to get refocused on that. And I think President Trump, I know his team is going to, be turning to peace through strength and deterring China and away from all this endless war policy like we've seen with the Biden administration. So DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency with Musk and Vivek, and that idea has got to be put to use, don't you think, to help us do this job of increasing capacity in current shipyards, creating new shipyards inside the United States, whether it's Guam is inside the United States, as far as I'm concerned, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, maybe even use other territory that are on the Pacific Rim area up in Alaska to do it. But it all takes increases in money and funding. And as I said at the beginning of the show, there is no appetite in Congress or by the American people to increase defense spending. We're almost at $1 trillion a year now. So but we've got to find the money because we've got to do this. What are your thoughts on how we can do that?
Well, first of all, there's something called the Maritime Administration, which is MARAD. It's a federal ship financing program. Title 11 it's called. And look it up. It's MARAD. And basically this program allows the federal government to finance and help fund smaller shipyards. The smaller shipyards are important because they provide resources, like you said, manufacturing and all that. That has basically become, sorry, that's basically become obsolete in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. We need to reinvest money into that. With Doge, I hope they're looking and saying, hey, where's this defense budget going? Why is this defense budget being sent to Ukraine? Or better yet, there's another trick that's happening. The defense budget is going to give contracts to companies like Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or some of these other companies for them to do worldwide logistics. So, for example, before the October 6th or I think it's October 7th, thing that happened with Israel, what happened? There was a big email that went out saying Raytheon has and Lockheed Martin, we're looking for subcontractors to support in potential incident in the Middle East. It's almost like they knew beforehand, and they already had over $100 million ready to go. Well, what did they use that money for? No one knows, right? What were they deploying? Because it's Israel's conflict, right? This kind of money that's being invested to this needs to be looked and needs to be broken down. How is this money being spent and repurposed? What first thing that they need to do is understand, what do we need to do to combat against China from a maritime perspective? How can we get more shipbuilding facilities here? If you look at that MARAD program that's here for shipbuilding grants and investments in small ships, that is huge. We should have all across the East Coast, we should have shipbuilding companies, facilities. There's no reason we can't. Okay, and all across the West Coast, we should have that. Hey, we can have it in Florida. We can have it everywhere. I mean, there's coast everywhere. And our Navy should be so strong that, we're not talking about attacking, but so strong that we can defend against anyone. And I believe we can today, but it's a combination of the entire military to do it. The whole point, and just a side note here, when I talk to a lot of friends of mine who are in the Marine Corps, who are in the Army, and I always ask them, I'm like, it's amazing. The Army has ships. The Navy has a ground force. The Air Force has a ground force. The Air Force is the only one without ships and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, because the whole point is, any of these branches should be able to fight a war on their own to some capacity. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Here's the question: can we really do that today with the United States Navy? And the answer is no. And so we need to double down and triple down on that. And we need to put more money in here. And so I hope Doge does that. I really believe that it has the ability to do it. The question is, will the president and the Secretary of Navy and the Secretary of Defense listen to those requirements, cut in the places needed, get rid of the waste in these large contracts? And that will force Lockheed Martin and others to really lose a ton of money. They're expecting billions of dollars per year to come in contracts that come out to them. Doesn't mean they're making billion. They may give out subcontracts or whatever, but they're looking for that. And we have to regulate that.
Yeah, we've got to find the money. And that program, I think, you're exactly right. The money's there inside the current defense budget. If we just have the ability and the political willpower to use Doge to find it and repurpose it. Let's take one more question before we get to the end of the show. Rob, go ahead. Make it quick, though.
All right, Warren, you heard the Colonel. Make it quick.
So I just want to make that quick. So I think, what's your best recommendation for Trump's second administration to just make the Navy industrial complex better than now? Because I think U.S.
Do you have
is
a
going
question for the Colonel, Warren?
What? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think I got it. What's your recommendation to the Trump administration to make the Navy's industrial complex better? And I would add more responsive and innovative, and if you can, less expensive.
Yeah, I mean, first you got to remove greed from the whole thing. You got to remove that whole big defense contractor model where they're hiring Nikki Haley's and they're hiring Mike Pence's and others to